Good evening and welcome to another episode of the Perceptive podcast here on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. I am, of course, Josh Placer, and we have another great cast for you this week. We're going to be discussing the upcoming or recently released early access game, Dreadlands. This is a turn-based or tactical-based strategy game, but with strong PvP elements to it. And my guest tonight is the creative director on the game, as well as the founder of Blackfox Studios. Please welcome to the cast, Peter Nielsen.
Hi, very glad to be here.
It is great to have you on, Peter. How is everything going?
Everything's going fine. We released in early access a week ago, so it's a bit stressful with the release and all, but it's going good. We have a nice game. It's stable and fine, and everything is going great.
All right, good to hear. And we certainly have a lot to discuss for our cast tonight. So, with this being your first time on, I always like to give developers the chance to kind of talk a little bit about themselves and kind of what is your background when it comes to game development.
Yeah, so my background is actually from the start, I'm a programmer. I started working at a Swedish company called Fat Shark about 13 years ago, and I spent 10 years there as a programmer and a code manager and kind of doing all kinds of programming. I programmed a lot of AI and UI and worked very closely with designers and learned a lot from them. And after a while at the Fat Shark launched a very successful game called Vermintide, which was a four-person co-op action game. And they kind of found their niche, Fat Shark, really liking the co-op FPS type of game, which I do enjoy as well. But I always wanted to do a strategy turn-based kind of game, which was like the first kind of games I played when I was a kid, like playing old XCOM and Jagged Alliance and all those kinds of games. And I really, really wanted to give it a shot, like try my own version of those kinds of games, making a turn-based game for people, still having like a turn-based game, but it's also having an online element to it. So it's not a strictly single-player experience, but you kind of share the experience with other players. That was what I felt was missing in the turn-based market. Mm-hmm. So I decided to try and see if I could start up a studio of my own and do that kind of a turn-based game.
Great. And another question that I like to ask some of our more international guests, for my audience, who I think I have developers and contacts pretty much around the world right now, how is the state of the game industry in Stockholm?
Yeah, it's pretty good. We have lots of big companies. We have the DICE and Avalanche and Mojang and Paradox and all those. We're sitting really close to each other, all kind of concentrated into one part of Stockholm. And we have like walking distance to DICE and Avalanche, and Paradox is just across the street. So it's a really nice little community with games companies. And we also, which I learned a little bit more when I started my own kind of more small indie studio, that we have a very nice indie community as well in Stockholm, which I'm glad to be a part of.
Great. And yeah, I think I've spoken to a few of those developers too. I think I may have spoken to Paradox this was like 4 or 5 years ago. So it's great to hear that things are still going well over there. So with that, let's talk a little bit more about Dreadlands and kind of like your thoughts on turn-based or tactical strategy design. So for the people listening to us right now who haven't heard of the game, what is kind of the pitch for Dreadlands?
Yeah, the pitch is it's a turn-based game, skirmish, which is set in a shared world, which means you will be meeting other players in between your missions, and you can challenge them to a fight, or you can decide to do co-op missions together with them. We had a nice pitch to the publisher, which was like XCOM meets Fallout. No, wait. I don't I don't remember. XCOM meets Blood Bowl in a Fallout Online world. Yeah, kind of like that. I think the pitch was. Yeah. So what we want to do is having something else, like trying to build a shared world with you have other people around you. You don't necessarily have to play with them, but just having other players in the same world as you makes a big difference, I think. Just having some other players there to show your like progress to and see what they have done and talk to them and invite and yeah, just having people around makes it a much more interesting game, in my opinion.
And I know from the pitch and kind of the press release for Dreadlands that it is very different to have a skirmish-based or a tactical-based strategy game that is built on PvP or multiplayer design. Because again, as my fans know, like when we talk about tactical strategy games, we can look at everything from XCOM to Disgaea, Final Fantasy Tactics, you name it. Those titles have been traditionally single-player oriented.
Yes, so that's something that's a little bit new. I mean, there's some turn-based PvP games out there, but it's not a big genre. The game that I think most of when I think about like turn-based PvP games is the Blood Bowl franchise, which is quite successful. I know XCOM has some multiplayer components to it, but it seems a little bit like a side note to the game.
Yeah.
But a lot of inspiration for Dreadlands is from tabletop games, which you usually play against each other, like smaller skirmish games like Blood Bowl, for instance, but also a lot of inspiration is from other Games Workshop games as well, like Necromunda and Mordheim, which is a little bit smaller scale, like you have 5 to 10 guys on your team, and then you fight it out against another opponent. So that was kind of the starting point for Dreadlands to look at how tabletop games do PvP. Kind of started from that, yeah.
And when we talk a lot about like tactical strategy or kind of multiplayer games set in turn based, usually the two main designs is either the I go you go system or we go, where or that kind of simultaneous turn. And what does Dreadlands do in terms of its kind of turn based design?
Yeah, so since we have the tabletop like starting point, we decided to go with the I go you go approach. We tried a little bit different approach. We tested some where we tested the classic I take one of my characters and I move it, and then you get to move with one of yours. But I really do enjoy like I move my whole team. I can make all my decisions. I can position all my guys to set up for your attack, or like Overwatch, all my guys. If you do like I move and then you move, it doesn't get so much like you do a tactical planning for your whole like crew at once. It's more like you're just thinking about one character at a time. Also, when you have a lot of turn-based games nowadays have the like initiative ordering, so they do with the highest initiative goes first, and then the next one. But I think you lose a little bit of the tactical planning. Like you plan for your whole team, and I want to move these guys over here to kind of flank, while these other guys try to draw and fire over here, and I can move first this guy, move him into the Overwatch to take the first hits because I know he can take it, and then I can move in my next guy. And I think you kind of lose that aspect when you do the I go, you go approach. We also tried some other approaches where we had like you could select 3 characters from your team, and if you then you can move these 3, but not the other. If you had 8 guys on your team, you can move 3 this turn, and you can select which guys you wanted to move, but you can only have a certain amount of points. But I think ultimately we can get down to that we really enjoyed like the more classical approach where you move your whole team and then the opponent does his turn. The only thing, I think the biggest drawback with the way we have chosen to do it, with the classical turn-based approach, is that the waiting time becomes longer for the opponent. So we kind of want the game. That's one of the like core design things we have. We want the game to be snappy. Like it shouldn't. Once you have made a decision what you want to do, you should be able to do it in 1 or 2 mouse clicks.
And that's always been that tough sale for multiplayer and turn-based games along these lines. Like if you're used to more of a real-time, or again, like you don't have to wait for the enemy to take their turn, it can become very grating to kind of have to sit there and wait for the AI or for another player to make their actions. Like, for myself, while I did enjoy playing Civilization, I could not play that multiplayer. Like, I could not sit there and wait for like my friend to take like 4 to 5 minutes and make a turn.
Yeah. That's. I mean, we have when you're playing it's single player, you have an AI which can do its moves simultaneously. So as long as it's just moving, all the guys are moving at the same time. So then the AI guy who's shooting, they do it in order. But we kind of wanted to speed up the AI's turn. When you're playing PvP, you have a set time limit on how much time you have for making all your moves. Right now it's 2.5 minutes, I think. But we're kind of still experimenting and see what player feels about that during the early access period. We also tried another approach in one of the betas where you have once you kind of failed an action, the turn went over to the other guy just to see if we could get up, both being a little bit more like every action matters more. Mm-hmm. So if you failed your attack, the turn would automatically go to the other guy unless you kind of sacrificed something to keep it in your turn. But you can only do that a set number of times. And yeah, we kind of enjoyed that, but ultimately it didn't really feel. It felt a little bit too punishing to lose your turn. So we decided to skip that as well.
Yeah, and that has always been like tricky in tactical based strategy games based on party composition and party size. For everybody listening to us right now, we all remember from Firaxis' take on XCOM just how big of a deal it is to get more characters and get more things, or expand your party roster for a map. And missing one turn or having your whole party lose their turn like that, that can be devastating if it occurs at the wrong time.
Yeah, that's what we wanted to have a mechanic so you could, if it was like the first shot you take, you have a chance to revert the turnover, so to speak. Mm-hmm. So in Dreadlands you have when you start a game you have 4 tactics cards, which are you create decks in between games, and then you get 4 cards from your deck, randomly selected from your deck, and you can exchange them a little bit and so forth. But once you're playing, you have 4 tactic cards. And then what we did is that in order to prevent a turnover, you could sacrifice one of your tactics cards if you really wanted to. But yeah, we tried that, but ultimately it didn't really work because the way players ended up playing is that they held on to the tactic cards and just to have them to sacrifice if needed. So, and that kind of lost the point with the tactic cards because we really wanted the tactic cards to be like the oomph of the combat. Like you could turn the tide of combat by playing the right tactic card at the right time. And players were a bit afraid to use their tactic cards because they wanted to save them just in case they get a bad turnover situation. So.
Yep, and the hoarder syndrome is definitely real in any RPG or strategy game.
Yeah. You want to save it just in case. You never know when you're going to need it.
Yeah, it's taken me years, but I think I've finally broken that. These days, I'm just like, I will use every health potion I need right now. I don't care. I will just take them all down as quickly as I can.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, me too. Yeah, maybe it has something to do with your becoming older and realizing you don't have that much time left. You want to spend it all now just to make sure you get to spend it. I don't know.
Maybe. Before we get to talking a little bit more about some of the interesting details of Dreadlands, I wanted to ask you, what are some of your favorite tactical strategy games, and were you inspired by any ones that you played to kind of begin the foundation for Dreadlands.
Yes, as I mentioned, we had a lot of like tabletop inspiration, but as far as turn-based game, I mean, XCOM is always a big inspiration for turn-based games. I would imagine, but I really enjoyed the old XCOM as well. That was my like first turn-based experiences. So I kind of try to get the same feeling that it's dangerous out there, and really the feeling that everything can go wrong if you're really not paying attention. But I mean, times change. It's really hard to make a game as punishing as the old school turn-based games, because people just don't buy that anymore. Like they will find another game if their progression. If they feel like their progression isn't working out, they're not going to restart the game over and over again anymore, if you know what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
Other than that, I would say Giant Alliance has also been a huge inspiration for old school turn-based games, which I always enjoy playing. I always wanted a new sequel of Giant Alliance, but they always pop up some kind of Giant Alliance clone every year, but I haven't found anyone that's kind of fill the void of Giant Alliance ones.
Yeah, and it is very hard, I feel, today to try and balance that kind of tactical strategy between, the depth and the brutalness of, like the first generation with trying to make something that's more playable and accessible today.
Yeah, it's really, really hard. I mean, our Dreadlands has been on the first iterations was really, really brutal. But I mean, we both listened to player feedback, and we can kind of, since we have we don't have like a save, we use like an out save all the time, so you can't go back and replay the same mission over and over again like you can do in XCOM and everything. So it was very, very brutal, and you could have a bad game, and it would more or less wipe your team, and you have to restart, but you couldn't go back to the last save, so you had to start over. And we've been working hard on that, because that's a feature we want to have still in the game. Like, this is your gang, you can't save load to complete a mission. You have to accept that sometimes you fail a mission and you have to move on. But having said that, we have lessened the brutality of the defeats, so to speak.
Yeah, and that's always been very hard to balance. I think even the Elise iterations from Firaxis don't necessarily, I think, succeed in that regard of allowing the player to pivot or, make the best of a bad situation. Because again, with games with permadeath, you lose your top 6 characters in a map, you might as well just end the game right there, because you're never going to be able to recover that amount of time and resources spent.
Yeah, I agree. I always play. I have the mindset. I always want to play the Iron Man mode, if they exist on a game. And then once you kind of get one of those big defeats, you stop playing that game.
Yes, I know.
Except I'm defeated.
Mm-hmm. Or with XCOM, you take that 95% shot and it still misses. Yeah. And then you have to resist the urge to throw something out the window when that happens.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that's another tricky one with the randomness of these types of turn-based games.
And now, getting back to Dreadlands, from my time I spent playing it, I think this was again either the day of its early access release or a few days before, I noticed several unique things to the game that I wanted to discuss, and I also wanted to share some of my thoughts with it as well. So,
sure.
The first thing that immediately kind of struck me as being different is the focus and the interaction of melee in the game. Because for those of you listening to us right now, when we play a lot of tactical strategy games, they are either all melee with maybe a minor focus on range, of stuff like the Final Fantasy Tactics, Tactical Ogre games, or they're all range with a very slight focus on melee. And with Dreadlands, there's a very major aspect of how melee interacts with range. And I was hoping you could kind of explain that for the people listening to us right now.
Yeah, so what we kind of want to accomplish is that we want to have both options. You should be able to make like a ranged theme gang if that's what you like, or a melee theme gang. But we want the core idea is like if you can initiate melee combat, then you're in a pretty good position. If you allow your opponent to initiate melee combat, then you're in a pretty bad position. And we also want to have like this kind of like a chess game where you can, if you go into melee, you get melee locked with your opponent. So if you charge in, you can kind of lock up their best ranged guy, and he can't use his ranged weapon while he's locked in melee. So what you can do is this guy can try and escape the melee, but then you get free attack on him. So that's probably a bad idea. So what we want to do is like a chess game, like you can charge in with one of your guys, push him away, and get your ranged guy free, and then he can move away and take his shot. So you kind of want to think about a lot about positioning and making sure you can free up your guys and all that kind of nice things. Yeah.
And that's, again, like a very unique take on melee combat. Like, when I played XCOM, or the Frax take on XCOM, the big thing about XCOM 2 was that while melee was very powerful, it left your character completely exposed. So, what usually ends up happening is that if you don't kill that enemy with that single melee hit, they're just going to get a burst fired down by every enemy, within 5 feet of them.
Yeah.
And it was it definitely took me out of left field when all of a sudden I went to shoot a guy who was attacking my guy melee, and it's like, no, you can't do that. Like, wait, what?
Yeah. Yeah. We prevent like firing into melee because it just doesn't make sense, I think, to fire when your guy is fighting another guy in melee. But we have a lot of feedback. Some people are not really think that's a good solution because they kind of get immune to ranged attack while you're locked in melee. But there's some things we're still looking at if we want to keep. But we're talking a little bit internally about allowing to shoot into melee, but at a very hard to hit. When you say like a to hit penalty, and if you miss, you have a very big chance of hitting your own guy instead. So it's a little bit the risk reward scenario that you probably don't want to do it unless you're very like desperate to get out of this jam.
Yeah. Now, another thing about Dreadlands, as we said earlier, this is a PvP focused game, so there's definitely a lot of like almost like more like on the persistence side in terms of like upgrading your faction, character unlocks, progression along those lines. And I only had a chance, or we only played this for about like an hour or so on stream, so we didn't get a chance to really delve into it. But for the people listening to us, what does, I guess, long-term progression look like in Dreadlands?
Yeah, so we have the single player like aspect of it where you level up your gang and you get better gear, and you also level up your gang's fame, which unlocks more tactic cards, and it also unlocks more formations which you can use. But for the PvP side, we're adding like a rankings and a seasons. So we haven't really nailed it down how long a season is. We're going to try some different takes on it during the early access, but the initial thought is to have like a 1 or 2 months seasons, and then depending on your ranking, you unlock certain rewards at the end of the season, like skins and some gear perhaps. But it's not decided exactly what you're going to unlock by the season rewards yet, but we wanted to make it feel like it's something worth striving for.
And one thing that I noticed, and I was a little bit confused about this, as you said, you can upgrade to unlock different formations. And looking at
Yeah.
the formations, it tells you like different like I'm not sure if they're considered classes or I guess just like their ranking. Like it was like elite, scout, leader, etc.
Yeah.
And during our play, I was able to put characters who weren't, the chosen or the designated ranking in the formation. Was that a bug, or is that kind of like, is there like a risk reward for doing that?
No, what we do is we have 4 different ranks. We have the leader, elite, ganger, and rookie, I think we call the last one. So formations can have different sets of these ranks. So you can have a leader, 2 elites, 2 gangers, and 2 rookies, for instance. But you can always like exchange taking a lower rank in a higher ranked slot, if you know what I mean. So you could use like an elite slot, and if you don't have an elite available, if it's in the medical center, for instance, you can fill it up with a rookie instead, just to fill the formation.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, so the formation is something we're still working on during the early access. They're a little bit of in a beta stage or testing stage, trying different kinds of formations. But what we want to do is also encourage different play styles by using these formations. So what we will be adding during the early access is that when you select the formation, you will also have like a passive buff, which is connected to that formation. And you will also get a specific tactic card, which is also tied into that formation. So that's in the works right now.
Okay.
Upcoming feature.
Now, for people listening to us right now, in the current state of the early access, you have 2 playable factions. I know from looking at the page that the 3rd faction will be available probably at 1.0. For the people listening, what is kind of like the playability or like the styles of the factions in the game right now?
Yeah, so we have 2 factions in the game right now. So we have the Scrappers, which are kind of like a crazy mechanic inventors. We kind of compare them to like crazy Skavens. If you played Warhammer, like they have a very big like risk reward ratio. Their tactics include like bomb rats, which is really powerful, but they're a little bit random when they are exploding and which targets they will run to. So they're not 100%. You don't really know what you're getting. You can plan for it, and you can they will always run to the closest enemy, but you have to kind of plan for which will be the closest enemy if the enemy starts moving. And you can also, if you know what you're doing, you can use these bomb rats that are chasing you if you're playing against the scrapper to kind of lure them back into the scrapper fold. So you have to be a little bit careful. And as I said, you don't exactly know when they're exploding, if they're exploding in next turn or in the turn after that. But that is one example for the scrapper tactics. And they're a little bit more like scavenging, scrapyard themed. And the other faction that we have in right now is Tribekins, which is more nature themed. So they're having animals fighting besides them. They have bears and wolves and boars, which you use to fight with. And these animals are considered a part of your gang, so they level up, and you use them like a normal fighter, like any other, and they also level up and get new skills and can use better gear as well, mostly armor in their case, but we have some improvements to their weapons as well, which you can find and unlock. And they're, as I said, they are a little bit more nature themed, so they have like healing tokens which they can use, and they have different kinds of mosquitoes which they can attack with, or healing flies which can attach to a unit and then continue to heal them as long as they are wounded. It's kind of like those kind of things. So they're a little bit more like the Scrapper team is a more well-rounded team. All of them can fight, use ranged weapon and use melee weapon, and are pretty good in both, but really not super good in any of them. Tribekins is a little bit more special because you have the beast, which is only melee, obviously. So you have a little bit more like their tank character is a big bear, and he can take a lot of hits, and it's really tankish. And the normal Tribekin humans, like hunters and rangers, they are more ranged focused and not super good in melee, but they're kind of dependent on their animals to protect them and keep enemies away from getting too close to them. And then we have the third faction, which we will unlock during the early access, actually, in a couple of months. So it will be in before release, and they are more big and brutish. And their background is more like they are an escaped slaves, which kind of revolted against their former masters. And they are full of chem stimulants and stuff because they were supposed to work hard in the mines. So they're really big and strong, but they also kind of, it's a downside to that as well because they have some problems with all their implants and gem stuff and that, so which you have to manage as well. But their playstyle is more, they're big and strong, but a little bit slower and they're more focused on short to intermediate range, not really great at long range, which the Tribekin hunters and rangers are.
And with the three factions, as we said, you have the different characters, you have the different individual units that are broken down by their different roles, leader, elite, etc. Yeah. I was looking at the page that allows you to buy or acquire new characters. Are the roles themselves kind of fixed in the sense that one leader for the tracker is the same as another, leader for the track, or do they have some kind of differentiating elements to them?
Right now, when you start out, they have the same skills from the start. But as you level up, you get your skills from a pool of skills, and you get to, every time you level up, you get to pull 2 skills from the pool, and you can select one of them. Okay. So the builds will be different. We don't have a fixed talent tree, so you know that every leader will be the same at the start, but every leader will most likely not be the same at level 5 or level 10. They will kind of take a different path, so to speak. But yeah, the starting stats are the same for a Tribekin leader and another Tribekin leader.
Okay. And with the game being in early access right now, are there any plans to add in new characters or roles for the factions in the coming months or even past 1.0?
Yeah, we're talking right now about adding a new role to both Scrapper and Tribekins. I don't know, time-wise, when we'll do that, but what we have discussed is to have a more clear support character, support classics. That's what we're looking for. And that's kind of something we feel is missing a little bit from the teams, a very clear support character.
Now, with the other aspects of Dreadlands, one thing that I was looking at is that, as you said earlier, you have kind of your gang level or your gang progression system. And while we were playing the game, we noticed that as you send your characters out on missions, there's a lot of persistence in terms of, ammo used, armor being destroyed, health, things like that, as well as various kinds of currency. Yeah. For people listening, what kind of how does your resource system work?
Yeah, so what we have is 4 different currencies in the game. We have the credits, which you buy stuff for, and you have the scrap metal, which you can find. You can either find it in missions, or you can buy them from some traders. They're not that common. Or you can use excess items that you have found and salvage them for scrap metals. And scrap metals are used for repairing armor and repairing jammed weapons, and also used for constructing things. Right now you can construct ammo with scrap metals. You don't have to buy new ammo you can construct them yourself if you have an excess of scrap metal. And the next currency we have is medical supplies, which is used for healing wounded characters. They're also found in the missions. You can find small medical supply boxes where you can find medical supplies and bandages and little other stuff. So medical supplies are used for when you get injuries. Some injuries you can heal straight up. It just costs X amount of medical supplies, and then they're fine if you have a light wound. If you don't heal them up in between fights because you don't have medical supplies enough to heal all your gangers, then the next time they get the light wound, it's converted into a more lasting injury, and then you have to put them in the sick bay, and they're going to have to miss a couple of missions, and it's going to cost you more medical supplies. So it's a little bit of a balancing act on which characters are worthy of your medical supplies, so to speak.
And for people listening, is there any kind of like permadeath or long-term punishment for characters running out of health?
Yeah. So what the injury system in this iteration that we have right now for early access is that if you don't take care of your fighters, if you let them fight even though they have injuries, either because you don't think he's a worthy enough fighter of your medical supplies, or if you're forced to use this character even if you don't really want to because you don't have any options. So then they can get permanent traumas, we call them, which is you can have both a positive and a negative aspect of it. Like I think an example is, I don't remember the name of it now, but he's kind of paranoid, so he's moving slower because he's gotten so many hits or injuries, so he's moving slower and he's very cautious. But on the other side, he's gotten a slight bonus to his range skill, so he's better at shooting as well. But you also, if you take it this far, if you don't take care of injuries, you get as far as you have a chance to get these traumas. You also have a chance to get him like a permadeath for him. But it's not like the first iteration of the injury system I had. Then it was more like after a fight, if you had received an injury, we kind of roll on our injury table and see what the injury is, and it was a chance you could die. So it was a little bit harsher, and we had a lot of feedback from our beta players that they wasn't really enjoying the experience when it was random if your fighter died after the mission or not. So we're trying different stuff all the time during early access, but this current iteration is more in the player's hands. So if you really like one of your characters, you can prioritize him and make sure he's always given the medical supplies so he doesn't get lasting injuries and stuff.
And for people listening, I also want to clarify with you that, as we said, Dreadlands there is the PvP aspect, but it is not a forced PvP, correct?
No, it's not forced. So you can either queue up for PvP in your home, or you can queue up for PvP anywhere, actually. Or you can, if you meet someone on the world map when you're traveling, you can challenge them to a fight as well. But it's not forced upon you. We're kind of toying with the idea of having PvP flags for certain missions. So you have a delivery missions to another settlement, and during this mission you are flagged for PvP. So then anyone can attack you, and you can't. You don't have an option to escape. But that's still on our ideas list of cool things to implement.
All right. And from what I was playing the game, I did have some little issues with the general UI and playability. And I guess one of them was kind of being able to quickly attach gear to characters, quickly reapply ammo. Are there any are you guys looking at doing more in terms of quality of life features or updating the UI through early access?
Yeah, we have a lot of things we want to improve, UI being one of them, of course. And then it all comes down to prioritizing what is most important to the game and to the players playing the game, I would say. I mean, we have a pretty strong community, and we have a lot of people that's very active on our Discord channel, and we get a lot of great feedback from them. So we try to listen to the issues that they have most, the issues that they have most problems with, and trying to see what we can do. But ammo, I think we are pretty fine with. What was the issue you were thinking of? Like, you have a hard time reloading, or
like after the mission, it didn't seem like there was an easy way to just quickly say, give everybody reload or heal or things like that.
Yeah, that's something we're going to be looking at. The thing, why I think the hard part there is kind of if you do like a reload all button, maybe someone has just shot one shot. Should he as well reload, or do you just reload if you have spent more than half your bullets? Or it's all these smaller kind of questions that kind of creep up as well. Because once you reload, you use one of your ammo resources, even if you only shot one of your ammo. But yeah, we both for the ammo and for like the repair interface in the workshop, we want to use you can have a repair all button, so you don't have to go into manually to every fighter and repair his armor and then repair his broken gun, and that you can just have a repair all button, and it will cost you 25 scrap metal or something, so you don't have to be like tedious, go through all your fighters and see which ones needs repairing.
And speaking about the resources, right now as you play the game, you get your resources by completing the missions. Will there be like any kind of passive collection? Like, will like the base building or like gang management system get like any like extra mechanics or elements to them?
Yeah, what we discussed internally with the base management, what we want to do is have like passive missions, which you can if you start piling up fighters, you have more fighters than you which are alive or like right now, then you can use in a mission. You can send some of them out on passive missions to collect resources instead.
Okay.
So that's one of the things we're talking about to add.
Now,
and also if you, sorry to interrupt, also if you have gang members that have gotten lots of permanent injuries, so you really don't feel like they're so valuable anymore. So instead of just retiring them, you can kind of keep them in your gang and just use them for passive missions or that kind of stuff.
Okay. Now, one thing that I wanted to clarify for people listening, and I also wanted to ask you about this. As we've said, with how the campaigns work, you choose your faction at the start, and that's kind of like, your chosen class, your chosen group. Will there ever be, or has there been any thoughts about allowing for cross-faction groups in the game?
All right. Good question. We haven't really thought about that in that sense. What we have is like each of the factions have their own campaign as well. So when you play the Scrappers, for instance, the Scrapper campaign is 10 chapters long, so you play through that. And if you choose to play the Tryokins, you get a whole other set of campaign missions for the first 10 chapters. And I'm not really sure how to do like a mixed. What kind of we have something that we added which is not completely done yet, which is kind of touching on this subject. It's that we have the hired guns, which could be like renegades from other factions and stuff. But we haven't really thought about like a pure cross faction, so to speak.
Okay.
But that's an interesting thought. There was like when I used to play Blood Bowl before, I remember there was a team, I think they were called like Mongrel Horde or something like that, and their like special ability was that they could pick from races that usually couldn't play together, which could be like a really interesting combinations. But then they had like lots of penalties as well because they didn't really like each other. So something like that would be interesting to try, I think. But I'm not sure how to actually implement it just with the different gang factions. So maybe if you choose like a base faction, like the Scrappers, but then you cannot take in renegade tribe kings as well, or something like that. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, but again, like for these kinds of systems, there's always things, or there's always ways you can expand and add to them, given popularity and the time. There's always just trying to know just how much you can really add on before you may end up breaking or completely destroying some elements of your mechanics.
Yeah. I really enjoyed like adding like new types of mechanics. Like we have a lot of plans for more factions in the future, and you always wanna find like a unique twist on them. Like these tribe kings and scrappers that we have now are kind of like the base factions. Like they play they have different tactic cards, but they're kind of similar. We really want to find something that's like for our fourth faction, have something even for our Scarbacks, it's going to be pretty different, I would say, in their play style. But even the fourth faction, which we're talking about, would be a lot more like reliant on stealth and stealth mechanics. So really finding something unique about factions, I think it's really fun, and trying to find unique gameplay elements. And with this stealthy kind of faction, we also talked about, it's still just like internal talk about how they could work. But one mechanic that we like, which would be really fun to implement, is that they can, because they sneak in stealthy, they can kind of sneak peek on their opponent's tactic cards to know what they have for tactic cards and stuff. But I'm not entirely sure how to make that work. But that's one of the ideas we're working with, to see if we could do something with.
Great. And I think with that, I have a few, general wrap-up questions for you. But before we get to them, are there any aspects of the design of Dreadlands that we haven't touched on that you'd like to bring up?
Yeah, well, we have, not that it's in the game right now, but we're adding the co-op feature during early access. I think that's going to be in a month or two or something like that. And I think that will be something that will really also kind of elevate the game, because then you can also, the way we want to implement co-op is that you do your turns simultaneous with your like co-op friends, so you don't get three teams, like I go, then you go, then the AI go. Like we are going at if we play together, we go at the same time, and we get half a team each. Okay. So, and we kind of have to cooperate a little bit to make sure we're targeting the right targets and stuff. And I think that's going to be a really cool aspect as well. Other than that, I think we touched up pretty much all the things that I can think of right now.
One thing that just came to my mind, we didn't touch on the actual like weapons and gear in the game. Are you going for kind of like set gear, or will there be any kind of random or procedural generation in terms of the equipment that appears in the game? Yeah,
so we have for weapons, for instance, we have a base version of the weapon, and they have a set of traits. For instance, if you have a spit gun, which is kind of a automatic weapon, they have a burst trait which makes them shoot 3 times instead of 1, but you can't use the aim action with them. So that's like a base weapon, and then we have the rare version and the elite version of that game. And a rare version is the same weapon, but you have like an extra trait on it, like a rare trait.
Okay.
And that trait is randomly picked from a pool which this weapon can use. And the same with if you have an elite weapon, then you have a rare and an elite trait. And then we're going to have the legendary weapons, which is going to have either another one. So you can have a combination of traits on the weapons. So the kind of procedurally generated, but on a lighter scale, so to speak.
All right.
But the base stats of the weapon will be the same if the trait, which it gets, some traits increase the damage, for instance. So then you get a more damaging weapon if you have the brutal trait, for instance.
I think with that, I just have a few general wrap-up questions for you, and then we will endings for this cast. And if you or anyone else from Fat Shark or your company would be interested in coming back on in the future, we can certainly do a follow-up cast to talk more about Dreadlands or another game, probably like later on.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
All right. So, with that, to begin to wrap things up for our cast, as we said, Dreadlands came out on early access about a week ago. I think maybe actually a week. I think almost a week exactly from when we're recording.
Yeah, exactly a week. Yeah.
For people listening, how long are you planning on staying in early access?
Yeah, so the plan is to stay for 5 to 7 months. It kind of depends on all the feedback we get and what we want to focus on. We have a roadmap set up in our Steam page, which feature we want to add. And I think we have like 7 major features which we want to implement during the early access. So yeah, we're expecting between 5 to 7, 8 months, depending on how much time it takes and how much feedback we get from players as well, of course. Yeah, that's the plan.
All right. And right now, it is currently available on Steam. Are you planning on going to any other platforms?
Not at the moment. We're focusing very hard on like the early access on Steam. I think once we get closer to release, we will maybe look into going on other PC platforms like Epic and Google Games, perhaps. I think it's a bigger step for us to take it to console, both in terms of like technical issues, but also in the way the game plays. I think a turn-based game on console is quite different than playing a turn-based game on a PC. So there's a lot of like UI and controller stuff to make sure it is working as smoothly as you want it to be. So, but yeah, to summarize, I think we're aiming for Steam, early access Steam, and then after release we'll see which other platforms we can take it to.
Great. And I think that is just about out of, I'm just about out of questions. I'm trying to think if there is anything else that is popping up. I guess here's one kind of random question for you. I was reading like reviews in the forum, and I also noticed this as well, that there are some similarities to, I think, a game Fat Shark did a few years ago. I think it was like a long time ago, Crater. Was that an inspiration or anything for Dreadlands?
Yeah, so Crater is a game Fat Shark did, I think it was 2012, which I was a part of. And I really, really enjoyed that game and the setting of the game. And Dreadlands is very much inspired, or it's actually in the same kind of universe as Crater. So they share in the same world and the kind of same art style as Crater. And so yeah, they have a lot in common. So it's not a sequel to Crater, or it's not even in the same part of the world as Crater, but it's set in the same universe as Crater.
Great. So with that, my final question for you then is, you have anything you'd like to say to the fans or to wrap up the cast with?
Yeah, it was really fun to be here and talking to you and discussing game design. And I really hope you enjoyed listening to us, and also that you really tried out Dreadlands. I think it's a really good game. Awesome. Of course I do.
All right. Yep, and I'm going to try to get a video up on the game soon. I'm definitely curious to see how the game pans out, because again, we really don't see kind of like this PvP focus on the tactical strategy genre. So definitely the best of luck to you and to the rest of your team.
Thank you very much.
All right, and with that said, we're going to end things for this week's cast. Be sure to check out Dreadlands on Steam. And if you are a developer working on an upcoming game or want to talk about game design, we are always looking for guests for our live and recorded shows. You can follow me on Twitter at GWBeister, and we have our Patreon at patreon.com/GWBeister, where your support can help to keep things going. For you, Peter, are there any social media you'd like to plug before I let you go?
Yeah, sure. We have the playdreadlands.com and playdreadlands at Twitter, which you can definitely check out. We also have a Discord server, which is full of Dreadlands interested people with lots of great questions and feedback. So if you're interested in Dreadlands but hesitant to, or kind of want to know more about the game before buying, you could definitely check out our Discord server, which you can find at playdreadlands.com. I'll link to it.
All right. And we also have the Game Wisdom Discord open to everyone. If you like talking about game design or hanging out, be sure to check that. There should be a link to that in the description down below. But that is going to do it for this week's cast. Come back for daily discussions on game design here and on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. And check back next week for another episode of the Perceptive Podcast, where we discuss the art and design of video games. Until then, have a great night.